Do you ever find yourself in a situation where time simply stops? For me, it took place in the middle of a dimly lit restaurant with expensive wine and white tablecloths. When the red wine hit my face, I was really in the middle of a sentence about my photography company. Not in a symbolic sense, not on an emotional level, physically. Just enough force to be playful, but not enough to trigger security, tossing a full glass. That's what Daniel would have said anyway. The warm, sticky wine seeped into the navy dress's neckline, which I had taken much too long to choose. The smell of cheap wine and luscious fruit clung to my skin. Everyone at the table gasped as if we were seeing a slow-motion car catastrophe. However, nobody made a move. Not a single word was spoken. Then, the laughter started. Daniel's chuckle. "Why do you act like such a fool all the time?" He smiled as he spoke. Like the smartest jerk in the room, he swirled the remaining wine in his glass. His pals laughed uneasily, some out of duty, some because they were cowards who didn't know how to confront a golf partner. I just sat there with my throat constricted, blinking through the scarlet drops that were streaming down my cheeks. I wasn't in tears yet. Perhaps that might come later. However, I felt my cheeks burn at that same time. From the embarrassment, not the wine. This supper was meant to be informal. On a let's hang with my coworkers night. I made small chat, smiled politely, and laughed when I should have. However, I had somehow turned into the evening's amusement. Once more. They were all watching, as usual. I was waiting to see my reaction. I grabbed my napkin and dabbed at my face. Be calm, measured. It's almost mechanized. Slowly and quietly, I got to my feet. "Pardon me," I said. After that, I left. As simple as that. Not a scene. Don't yell. Not a drama. But within, I was trembling within. All the way home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I wasn't sure if I was going to scream, throw up, or smash something against a wall. None of those things were done by me. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at my reflection in the microwave's glass, while the overhead light hummed softly. He has previously engaged in similar behavior. Not even close. It began quietly. Jokes. Digs that are passive-aggressive. Jokes that were just jokes. Making fun of my photos. Undermining me in discussions as though it were all quite amusing. However, this was novel. A moment in public. A face splashed with a glass of wine. A joke based on my honor. After one of his outbursts, I kept asking myself the same question. Was it really that bad? He didn't mean it, murmured the poisonous voice he'd fostered inside my head. He was simply under stress. Perhaps the first made him feel ashamed. I detested that voice. God. That side of me that was always trying to defend him. However, something broke that evening. No, not broken. Changed. I didn't become upset. Not quite yet. Later on, that would happen. Clarity was what I experienced at that very time. Sitting by myself in the dark with my hair drying from the red wine. Not the dramatic, motion picture type. The surgical, frigid sort. A little after midnight, I heard the front door open. He walked down the hall with steady, easy steps. I pictured him still enjoying the radiance of his social success. His shirt half untucked, and his tie free. Perhaps he thought I would be pouting and waiting for an unattainable apologies. Or worse, weeping. He would have been ecstatic. I cried, and he liked it. It gave him a sense of importance. He discovered me at the kitchen table instead. The laptop is open. I'm holding a pen. Be calm. In the doorway, he froze. "What are you doing?" he inquired. Slowly, I raised my gaze, creating a list. Confused, he cocked his head. "What?" I shut the journal. "Of all the things you've done to me." He sneered. I sneered, in fact. "Oh, Emma, hurry up. Avoid being theatrical." I remained silent. I simply grabbed my phone, tapped, and flipped the screen to look at him. The video was the cause. It had been recorded. The entire dinner gathering. The wine. The laughing. The way he grinned as I sat there in silence, embarrassed and soaking red. Daniel's smile stopped. "What is this?" He spoke more quietly now. "Just the way it appears." He bent over. "Did someone videotape it?" They believed I ought to have a copy. His jaw tensed as he gazed at the television. The flash of terror was visible. Daniel thrived on his notoriety. Everyone wanted to go out for drinks with him after work because he was the affable one, the fun guy at the company. He wasn't very smart. He lacked motivation. He was likable, though. That was his money. And now? There was proof. Unquestionable. Unforgiving. Remove it, he yelled. Why? I tilted my head and asked. It's only a joke, isn't it? He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I got up and moved carefully in his direction. Managed. Tell me, Daniel, would you be laughing if I had done it to you in front of my friends? His silence was sufficient response. Exactly. With frustration, he combed his hair. Emma, Jesus, you're going overboard. No, I answered in a composed tone. I was prone to overreacting. Weep. Express regret. Justify. Right now? I am now taking notes. I raised my notebook once more. He squinted his eyes. What is that? He whispered. A record, I murmured. Of all insults. You always gave me the impression that I should be tolerated rather than cherished. I have been monitoring things. He gazed at me as if I had developed horns. You require assistance. No, I responded, taking a step back. I required clarification. And now I have it at last. He blinked. So what? Will you keep this video above my head? Can you punish me? No, I replied. He let out a sigh of relief. All right. That is all I'm requesting. I gave a small smile. I'm going on, I meant. Not penalizing you. Simply abandoning you. He blinked. Once. Twice. What? Today I gave a lawyer a call. He said, Emma, in a harsh, now panicked tone. You're not being sincere. I showed him the screen. Legal advice. Reserved. Very serious. His laughter was now brittle at the edges and hollow. You won't end our marriage because of this. I gave a shrug. I'm not discarding anything. You did it already. I'm simply admitting it. Then the power changed abruptly. I was present when it occurred. He tensed his shoulders. His expression changed. The mask fell off. He took a step toward her. You believe that I'll simply give you everything? I gave a tiny, confident smile. No, Daniel. You shouldn't expect me to accomplish anything. I've already begun. I turned to go after that. I said, Oh, over my shoulder. You should look into your bank account. I then left. I didn't return to our home that evening. Failed to check the rearview mirror. Daniel was unaware of the existence of the flat I had been secretly renting for 2 months, so I drove directly there. It was tiny, unadorned, and only partially furnished, yet it had the scent of new paint and opportunity. For the first time in what seemed like years, I let out a breath after entering and dropping my luggage. There would be no more hotel-like white walls. Nothing is his and hers anymore. Only me. I refrained from crying. I believed I might. However, I chose to remain silent and let everything to settle. The silence had become pure, no longer heavy, open to the public. Daniel, too? He didn't give a call. Not that evening. I think he assumed I was bluffing, that I required some time to calm down, that we would act as if nothing had happened, and I would return with an apology, like I always did. I had already transferred half of our savings into a different account in my name, but he was unaware of this. I deserved it, in fact. I earned it. Daniel thought I was just a creative housewife experimenting with a camera. In actuality, though, my photography company made as much money as his work did, more occasionally. The sole distinction? It wasn't broadcast by me. I used to find that annoying, that I was not taken seriously by him. It was working in my favor now. I was in a cafe down the street by mid-morning. It was a peaceful place with lots of plants, cozy lighting, and delicious lattes. I double-checked by keeping my phone face down, my laptop open, and my bank account open. It was all there. I took a leisurely sip while observing the street and letting go of the year's burden in my chest. It buzzed after that. My mobile phone. Naturally, Daniel. I didn't answer. Once more, it buzzed. But then again, voicemail. At last, my curiosity overcame me. I inserted one earbud and hit the play button. Emma, he said in a tight, clipped voice that was already breaking. What on earth did you do? Are you crazy? Did you steal our money? Now, Emma, respond to me. Fix this. As I stirred my coffee, I allowed the message to unfold. It was there. The change. The fear. He had opened the account, most likely noticed the joint account was frozen, and most likely attempted to use the credit card but was denied. My silence was eventually causing his entire ecosystem to collapse. You see, Daniel was one of those people who lived as though he earned twice as much as he did. He always treated himself as though he was the one bearing the burden of the world, with flashy watches, dinner tabs he neglected to check, and impromptu excursions to blow off steam. However, budgeting, accountability, repercussions? Not at all. That was my responsibility, and I was no longer doing it. That day, he made 5 more calls. 3 texts were sent. The tone had already changed once more by the afternoon. More ice, less flames. This is getting out of hand. Are you truly attempting to destroy me over a joke? Come of age, Emma. He was still unable to grasp it. However, another person did. My friend Mia gave me a call at about 4 p.m. Her voice trembled with a mixture of joy and dread. Emma, you've seen it. Tell me. What have you seen? The article. From his supervisor. I took notice of that. I opened our group chat window. Finding it didn't take long. A screen grab of a post on LinkedIn. The subtext wasn't even subtle, but the tone was professional and there were no names. A guy has no place leading others in the job if he is incapable of treating his partner with dignity in public. When you believe no one is looking, you are acting with integrity. Below it, dozens of remarks. This, 100%. Whoa, brutal. The quietest diners at the table tend to notice the most. That meal had been attended by Daniel's supervisor. He hadn't chuckled. He had observed. And now? Once more, he was observing, in public. I silently scrolled, experiencing an odd mixture of joy and melancholy. Not for Daniel, who deserved all of this, but for the length of time I would tolerate it. How many years I allowed myself to think that in order to maintain harmony, I had to be the bigger person, the one who is forgiving and keeps quiet. Being loved was the foundation of Daniel's entire career. Charming, on the connections. Although he wasn't very good at his profession, he was at ease. An excellent hang. After meetings, folks would invite him out for drinks. Charm, however, is only effective when people desire to be charmed. And they didn't now. There was another voicemail. This time, I didn't even use the earbud. He struggled to sound composed as he replied, Emma, you're making a mistake. All right, I can solve this. Let me repair it, please. Anger was no longer present. Not at all. Fear was the cause. The type he never imagined having to experience. And me? I wasn't angry. I wasn't even arrogant. I was steady. Perhaps exhausted, but steady. I replied to him with a 4-word text. Come to the house. When I arrived, he was already pacing. I intentionally parked halfway down the street. I took a moment to catch my breath. It's time to reflect. He glanced up like a man practicing humility when I stepped in. He said, let's talk like adults. My keys fell to the counter. All right. He jumped right in. I was a jerk. I acknowledge that. I ought not to have done it. However, you're exaggerating this situation. I arched an eyebrow. In front of 10 people, throwing a beer in my face is proportionate? He twitched his face. That was a dumb joke. I didn't believe. No, Daniel. That is the issue. You never consider. Because I never think, and I always let you get away with it. With his hands out as if to prevent the conversation from breaking, he took a step forward. I apologize. I mean it. Simply, can we get this to stop? I gazed at him. You're not interested in fixing us. You wish to correct perception. Quiet. Tell me I'm mistaken. He didn't respond. That's when I realized. Knew for sure. Love had never been the topic. Control had been the issue, keeping me near enough to maintain his universe while maintaining my prominence. You believe that the only person who can play games is you? His voice hardened as he spoke abruptly. You believe that I'll let you keep everything? I also created this life. I didn't wince. Indeed. And I hope it's fun for you, because it will be all you have left after I'm finished. Confused. He blinked. What on earth does that signify? I grabbed my suitcase and made my way to the door. I turned around just before I left. Oh, and Daniel? Perhaps you should check your email. After that, I departed. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. However, I was able to visualize the precise moment he opened it. He did not receive the email. HR was the recipient. That evening, I didn't check my phone. Did not have to. I knew what was going to happen. I didn't send a lengthy email. Don't make a huge speech. A simple, business-like message with the video included. An explanation to Daniel's human resources department that this was not a one-time incident, but rather a symptom of a persistent trend that affected both his personal and professional life. I spoke their language. Words like public degrading, unfriendly environment, and emotional wrongdoing. I didn't make things up. I didn't have to. It was all in the video. I had already missed 2 calls when I returned to my flat. Next, 5, then 9. I let them to accumulate. The voicemail followed. Emma, he replied in a raspy, thin voice. You're crazy. How on earth did you accomplish that? He wasn't shouting. That would have required energy that he no longer possessed. He sounded apprehensive, and I didn't care for the first time. I poured a glass of wine, white this time, and listened to the bustle of the city below as I stood by the window. I no longer felt small when I heard the music. It seemed sincere. It seemed as though the truth I had been enduring for years was now coming into alignment. One more voicemail. I hit the play button. Are you aware of what this might do to me? He sounded exhausted, as if he hadn't found the right words after running up a flight of stairs. I sipped. Chilly. Chris bought liberation. He hadn't apologized yet. He was still more worried about losing something than he was about making me feel unimportant. I had a good night's sleep that night. I ultimately stopped bearing his burden, not because I was over it, God forbid. The following day, everything fell apart. Early in the morning, Mia called once more. He's on suspension. I blinked. Already? Like she was hiding beneath her desk at work, she was whispering. Yes, HR emergency meeting. Until they complete their internal review, he is on leave. I remained silent. She let out a breath into the phone. This really is happening, Emma. I was certain it was. It simply didn't progress as quickly as I had anticipated. The problem with businesses that identify as values, driven, and socially responsible, however, is that they don't play around when you give them a PR grenade that has already been detonated. Daniel, too? The grenade was him. I continued to browse our group chat. Daniel used to post tequila recommendations and fantasy football predictions in the same one. Now, though, crickets. Or worse, silenced pity. Gosh, it was a difficult dinner clip. I've always been curious about how he conversed with people when nobody was around. Oh no. Daniel was losing more than just his career. His reputation was slipping. He had spent years refining this version of himself, because the core is all that remains after charm is removed. Occasionally, the core becomes rotten. He called again that afternoon. Once more, I left it on voicemail. This one? Not the same. Don't be angry! Avoid gaslighting. Just a kind, pleading voice. I didn't want for it to go this far, baby. Please! Simply give me a call back. Let's make this right. I gave it 2 plays. I wanted to recall the sound of that version of him, the one that only emerged when his control faltered, not because I was tempted. He always used the same voice after a fight, the one that was once effective. However, it is no longer the case. I texted him that night. Come see me, for the final time. He concurred. He did, of course. At the house we met, neutral territory, or as impartial as a battlefield can be, while one side continues to believe they have the upper hand. He had a rugged appearance, a little rumpled. Eye fatigue, not as well polished. More actual. Emma, he said, taking a step forward. Can we just have a conversation? Not with the dangers? Not with the emails? I arched an eyebrow. You mean without facing the repercussions? Already agitated, he ran a hand through his hair. You can make a point without destroying me. I let out a breath. You've already done it. All I'm doing is holding up a mirror. He paced. When he was unable to steer a conversation, Daniel always did that. He attempted to recuperate, reroute, and reinterpret. However, what about mirrors? You have no right to dispute with them. He whispered. Today I lost a client. I said nothing. I can't get my supervisor to answer the phone. My group is behaving as though I'm radioactive. It's still silent. At last, he gave me a serious look and asked, "Are you pleased now?" That query. God, that query. Happy? I said in a quiet voice. I'm not doing this because I'm happy, Daniel. I'm doing it since I'm finished. He shook his head as if he was incapable of understanding that. How should I proceed? He inquired. I gave a shrug. I'm not sure. Make a fresh start. When no one is cheering you on, discover who you are. He sneered. You're having fun with this. No, I replied plainly. I'm making it through. Like strangers who formerly shared a bed, we stood opposite one another. And I sensed it in that quiet. The change. The instant he realized at last, he was unable to win me back. None of it was coming back to him. Later that evening, I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by boxes that I still hadn't unpacked, and went through my emails. My attorney had answered. The divorce proceedings were proceeding, tidy, unambiguous, accurate. Even when Daniel wasn't around, I had to be that way. The speed at which it was all falling apart was almost comical. It took very little to pull the first thread, demonstrating how intricately woven his world had been. One meal, a single glass of wine, just one chuckle. However, this went beyond that particular instance. That was only the match. For years, the fire had been growing, and now, all I did was watch it burn. Daniel was formally fired by the end of that week. They made no attempt to make it appear softer, no separating on both sides, not even a fluffy consulting cover. Simply put, after conducting an internal review, we have concluded that this individual no longer embodies our values. When the email was forwarded to me, I read it twice. Let's start with the facts. Just for the emotion. It didn't seem like a win. Not precisely. It was similar to the sound of a door that ought to have been closed long ago locking behind me. But Daniel? It wasn't warmly received by him. He dialed. A great deal. I paid them all no attention. Then the texts arrived. You got your point across. I've lost it all. Can we simply have a conversation like everyone else? I laughed at the final one. Ordinary folks? Ordinary folks don't call it foreplay when they hurl wine in someone's face. Every apology isn't turned into a guilt trip by ordinary folks. No, we weren't typical. We weren't. A few days later, Mia emailed me a picture. Daniel, by himself in a downtown bar, with two empty glasses in front of him. He sat slouched on a stool and gazed at nothing. Karma is not subtle, she wrote as the caption. I didn't answer. I was learning how to care for myself more, not because I didn't care. To be honest, I wasn't obsessed with Daniel's demise. I wasn't waiting for updates or following him on social media. I had lost that part of myself that used to track his moods like weather forecasts. I had left his home and his sphere of influence to live in a place I hadn't tasted in years. Silence. It no longer felt like a transition to my new residence. It was like mine. Instead of the frigid grays Daniel preferred, I painted the walls myself in warm tones. I played music loud enough to feel like a heartbeat through the walls, hung my own artwork, and lit candles that had a cedar and coffee bean scent. Even the camera he used to mock me was unpacked by me. He once remarked, "You'll never make real money doing that. It's funny how self-assured people can make mistakes." Work was flourishing. Not because of the drama, but because I finally had the energy to cultivate something genuine once I quit irrigating a dying marriage. Referrals quadrupled, and clients arrived. I wasn't always doubting myself and worried if Daniel would make fun of me after supper. I just made something, and it was evident. People took notice. The internet also did. Yes. The footage of the dinner party went viral. Enough, but not viral. Sufficient for people to mutter, inquire, and disassociate themselves from Daniel's previous golden boy image. It turns out that people don't always applaud when the curtain drops. Occasionally, they simply leave in silence. He was burned by that. More than the work itself. More than the cash. Daniel had to be commended. To succeed was insufficient. He also needed to be perceived as successful. He had no idea who he was without that. And now, there was no applause, not even his companions. I answered one of his calls one evening, about 3 weeks after it all began. I have no idea why. Perhaps closure. Or perhaps I was simply checking to see if the man on the other end still sounded like the person I once loved. Yes, he did. However, thinner. Emma, he inhaled as if my name were significant. Please, could we simply have a conversation? No attorneys. Not a threat. Only us. Us was no longer there. However, I remained silent. Allow him to fill the void. He said, I can't get another job. My emails are not getting a response. I've lost my references. I'm not like you, so you don't understand. I can't simply begin anew. That bit stayed with me. I'm not like you. He was correct. He wasn't. Because he had been coasting while I had been rebuilding. While he had reservations for breakfast, I had other ideas. I was gritted. He was charming. Charm is not able to withstand the truth. At last, I said, Daniel, I don't hate you. He hesitated. Most likely didn't anticipate that. But now I see you, I said. And I secretly believe that you do too. Click. That was it. Not a threat. No assurances. Just some clarity. Weeks went by. How many I stopped counting. The divorce proceeded in silence. Daniel's attorney was helpful, albeit likely worn out. The house did not cause us to quarrel. In any case, he couldn't afford to keep it. It wasn't what I wanted. The drywall is overrun by ghosts. At first, he tried to dispute about money, claimed that I was punishing him financially and draining him dry. The records, however, were truthful. The balances in the accounts, the profits. Every present that came from my side of the bed, every vacation I paid for, and every deposit I made were all recorded in the spreadsheet. He gave in, finally, and I went out to dinner after it was officially finished. By themselves, not with melancholy, in joy. I didn't purchase any wine. Not that evening. Nothing sardonic, hefty, or red was what I wanted. Just something tidy, chilly, easy. I snapped a picture of my food. I sent it to Mia with the following simple caption, finished. She responded with a dancing gif and 10 heart emoticons. That was sufficient. I received a message the following day, not Daniel's, from someone who had viewed the video, a female. Although she didn't know me, she was aware of what it was like to be made fun of by the person you trusted the most while seated at a table full of people. She informed me that seeing me go without causing a scene or having a breakdown gave her the confidence to do the same. I spent a lot of time looking at the message. Then it struck me. This was more than a tale of retaliation. Daniel wasn't the only person involved. It dealt with the consequences of ceasing to provide an explanation. As soon as you stop getting smaller, when you stop allowing other people to define what is normal, what is too sensitive, and what is only a joke, it dealt with the consequences of speaking the truth, even if your voice trembles, even if it means giving up every comfort. Because sometimes the only thing that makes you feel safe is the cage you decorate. And liberty? Walking out of a restaurant with your dignity intact and wearing a red wine dress is what freedom looks like. I saw him again 6 months after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't prearranged. The networking event I was to had excellent lighting and horrible jazz, and it was held on a rooftop. My work was hung on the walls like it belonged there, and I had recently completed a job for a well-known company. Individuals I had only seen in magazines were shaking my hand, posing inquiries, and uttering my name as if it were important. And across the room after that, Daniel. He took a while to notice me. He was by himself. Don't drink, not a crowd. It was just him and a cheap suit that was no longer quite right. He appeared older in his stance rather than his features, and his tie was crooked, as if he had been overburdened by existence. I waited for a moment to feel something. Anger, bitterness. I feel sorry. However, I didn't. I only sensed remoteness. It's the type that arrives when you stop waiting for someone to change, not the kind you measure in feet. When he did look up, he noticed me. We looked at each other. I witnessed the realization, the moment of embarrassment, and the remorse. However, not the type you have for another person. The feeling you get when you know you've ruined a relationship, you'll never be able to repair. He did not visit. He was not required to. So nothing more could be said. That evening, I returned home to my flat. The authentic one. The one has shelves that contained my books, prints, and voice, and walls that I painted myself. Not chosen to suit the tastes of others. Only my. After kicking off my heels, I stood by the window and poured a glass of wine. This time, white. Same city, same skyline. However, the lady behind the glass? Not the same. I was mentally practicing my apologies at this time last year. Right now, I was composing my own narrative. As I sipped slowly, I recalled that dinner party. To the wine splash, to the giggling, to the ensuing quiet. That, Daniel had assumed, was the joke. The conclusion of a cruel joke. However, it wasn't. It was the beginning. Because the majority of people don't tell you this, rock bottom isn't always a dramatic descent. It can be quiet at times, slow, one moment that finally awakens you after years of indifference. And you don't become angry when the time comes, when you at last realize the reality. You don't yell, you simply leave. Every step you take ahead turns into a journey back to yourself. Months went by. Life became easier, lighter. I didn't use the internet to stalk Daniel, failed to keep track. I didn't have to. Still, the voices found me. Word spread. He attempted to get employment in the same industry. Your name, however, is your currency in a field that is based on trust. What about his? Soiled. When he appeared, people grinned politely. However, no one asked him to return. Those who had shared his laughter turned their heads away. He dwindled. When your entire identity is based on performance, that is what occurs. There is nothing below when the mask comes off. I, however, was only getting started. Within 3 months of the divorce, I opened my first solo exhibition. It was completely sold out. I received an invitation to speak at panels for women. It's about rebuilding, not the scandal. About beginning anew while both hands are shaking and continuing nevertheless. After a conversation, one woman approached me with glazed eyes. "I heard your tale," she muttered. It provided the motivation I required. I nodded in comprehension rather than pride. Because your recovery turns into a silent protest when you live through someone who makes you believe that your suffering is unimportant. And when do you prosper? That isn't retaliation. That is a revolution. About a year after everything, Daniel sent me his final message. An email was sent. Brief. No subject line. I was mistaken. Now I see that. I hope all is okay with you. I didn't answer. Not with malice. However, it was no longer mine to bear. I was already letting go. I still ponder about that incident in the restaurant on some evenings. The crimson wine. My cheeks are hot. The quiet. I used to be haunted by it. It anchors me now. The incident that was meant to shame me turned into the first step toward freedom. And I don't always give a long speech when people wonder how I had the guts to quit. I simply say, grinning, I no longer found things that weren't funny.